Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. My guest on this episode of Writers at Work is Graham Nash, singer, performer, band leader, photographer, activist, and for our purposes, songwriter. Graham is a two-time member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for his role in the Hollies and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Also a member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame, he's composed pop songs that are known to several generations: Teach Your Children, Our House, Just a Song Before I Go, among them. But Graham has written scores of other songs also worthy of admiration and affection. There's at least one gem on each of his 7 solo albums, including Now, his latest, his 4 albums with David Crosby, 8 albums with David, Stephen Stills, and sometimes Neil Young, and those written during his half-dozen years with the Hollies. Many of his songs are uniquely his, tender and open-hearted, written in an intimate style as if whispered to a lover or a friend. I want to explore those songs with him today. When Graham left the Hollies in 1968, he said, "I can't take touring anymore. I just want to sit at home and write songs." Landing in Los Angeles, he did write, though decades of touring ensued. In fact, at age 84, he and his band will resume his tour in support of Now on July 7th and continue into October. See grahamnash.com for more. Before we proceed, I'll be referencing a lot of songs many of you may have never heard. I checked, and you can find every one of them on YouTube. And I've posted under my name a playlist on Tidal of more than 24 Graham Nash compositions. Graham Nash, welcome to Writers at Work.
Thank you very much, Jim. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Good, I'm the same.
Good. So let's go back to Blackpool when you were a child. Do you recall when you became aware that it was people who wrote songs?
I think when I was listening to the American Top 40 on a Sunday evening from Radio Luxembourg, which, if the weather permitted, you could get a clear signal. And I was completely obsessed with American early rock and roll, from the Buddy Holly to the Everly Brothers to Elvis before he went in the army, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, Fats Domino, etc. And I began to realize that not only were they heroes of mine, but they were actually real people.
Yeah. And when do you recall when you started writing your own songs? And did you have a natural affinity for it, or did you struggle?
It wasn't a struggle. I remember writing songs early with my partner, Alan Clark. We formed the Hollies in, I think, December of 1962. And we always wanted to write songs, and we did, because we had been, he was my best friend since we were 6 years old, and I'm now 84. So it just tells you how long we have been friends. And we started writing songs on a park bench opposite the Regent Road Baths, which was in Salford, which I come from. And here we are talking about it all these years later.
Yeah. What you wanted to write your own songs, the band wanted to write its own songs, but what did the label think of that?
We had a producer called Ron Richards. Ron Richards was a partner of George, and I think Ron was the first person to actually record the Beatles. He did. I think he did "Love Me Do." Anyway, Ron had a great set of ears, and he knew what would make an A side and what would just be relegated to a B side. And we kept trying to write A sides, and he said no. And then we wrote a song called "We're Through," and he said, well, let's make that the A side, and that was fantastic.
What was the process for you, Alan, and Tony Hicks? And could you give us an example where you were the driving force behind a certain song?
Yeah, Tony was a later addition to me and Alan writing songs, and that's when we started to use our 3 names. But I wrote a song called King Midas in Reverse,
Mm.
I thought we made a very decent record of it. And it's always been a hobby of mine to write songs that reflect the times in which we live.
Yes.
My wife Amy gave me a quote by Nina Simone, and Nina said, no matter what kind of an artist you are, a painter, a sculptor, or a musician, you have to reflect the times in which you live. And that's what I've always tried to do.
Uh, I want to get back to King Midas in reverse, but I came across a song of yours that I hadn't heard in decades, Graham, and it's called "What's Wrong with the Way I Live."
Ah,
And it was your solo composition. It was released in '63. Do you remember when you wrote it?
yeah, in late 62.
So you were quite young. We were 20 around then.
In 1962, I was 20,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
yes.
So may I quote this song? This is Graham Nash as a 20-year-old. What's wrong with the way I live, the way I use my time? People should live their lives, leaving me to mine. I'm a man who is defending all his rights to live in peace. That's quite something for a 20-year-old, Graham.
Well, certainly when it's incredibly relevant even today,
Absolutely.
with the Trump administration and what he's doing. Yeah, wow, 20 years old, eh? Okay.
And we see the Graham Nash, we see hints of the Graham Nash we've come to know in that song. I mean, you are defiant and stating your position.
Indeed.
Yeah,
Once again, you got to reflect the times in which you live.
yeah. So King Midas in reverse. Um, I've always loved that song, but I have to say that I've always loved your solo version of it.
Ah, yes. There's even a CSNY version of it, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think it foreshadows something that you do wonderfully well, Graham, and that I'd like to talk about, which is placing yourself directly in front of the listener and presenting your point of view without much in between. It's almost as if you're tapping us on the shoulder and saying, I have something to say to you.
Yeah, that's exactly what my writing style is. I want you immediately. I mean, the opening line of Simple Man is, incredibly relevant, and I want to tap you on the shoulder and tell you I've got something to say. Now, obviously, we don't have many answers, but we sure do have a lot of questions. That's for
Uh-huh.
sure.
Yeah. So, how long after King Midas in Reverse did you write Marrakesh Express?
Maybe less than a year later.
Okay. Okay. I never really did understand why your bandmates didn't want to record that tune.
Well, as a matter of fact, they did.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, and it's somewhere in the bowels of the tape library at EMI at Abbey Road, there's a version of the Hollies doing just the track of Marrakesh, and there was no train in it. That's what Stephen did brilliantly with his electric guitar in the CSN version of it. So they didn't really believe in the song. They thought, what happened basically is that every song that we made in the Hollies seemed to end up in the top 10, and this one, King Midas in Reverse didn't make it into the top 10, and so they stopped trying to trust my musical direction, and that's what happened with Marrakesh.
Yeah. So what do you think David and Stephen heard in it that your former colleagues didn't?
I think the fact that it could be a hit. I mean, don't forget the Buffalo Springfield and the Hollies and the Byrds had already had hits,
Yes.
particularly the Hollies way before the Buffalo Springfield or the Byrds. But I think David and Stephen recognized in it that it could be a great, almost rock and roll track.
Yeah. Yeah. We've heard often the story of how you first sang with David and Stephen in July of '68. What did they know at that point that you had a bunch of songs ready to be recorded?
I don't think they knew I had so many songs. I mean, that moment in history was magic to us. I mean, you know, we could recognize magic when we heard it. And
Yeah.
that's what happened to me when David and Stephen and I put our three voices together and made it one voice. Even though the Buffalo Springfield and the Hollies and the Birds were decent harmony bands, we had never heard anything quite like me and David and Stephen singing together. And at that moment, I realized that I'd heard magic. I wanted more of it. I knew I'd have to go back to England and leave the Hollies. Um, and here we are.
Yeah. And I imagine you thought to yourself, okay, now I have a home for these songs I've written.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what happened is basically after the first CSN record, we had a lot of songs. So what do? You have to get them down. You have to get them out of your soul,
Yeah.
and that's what happened. David did "If I Could Only Remember My Name." Stephen did the first Stephen Stills album, and I did Songs for Beginners.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we discuss Lady of the Island, Graham?
Sure.
I find that song to be anything unlike anything I heard at the time, and all these years later, I contend that that's true. I don't find any precedent for what you did with that song, which is, as we said earlier, tap on the shoulder. I have a story to tell you. It's just me and you, and here it is. Now,
Yeah.
so what led you to write it as you did? Not necessarily the lyric, but the stark arrangement.
The arrangement, first of all, let's deal with the tuning. It was the one of the very first songs I ever wrote when Joni showed me that particular tuning, which is F, F, C, G, A, C, going from the bottom strings up to the top strings. But what I remember about that song when we recorded it, first of all, it was only one take, and secondly, Crosby put a brilliant, almost cello like vocal pattern throughout my lead vocal. And it was a wonderful moment for me.
Yeah, it's such an appealing way to tell a story. Um, did you think it was risky? Do you think you were putting yourself out there a little far?
No, I never thought it was risky. I never thought anything that we did was risky. We always wanted to once again reflect the times in which we live, and we always wanted to tap you on the shoulder and have you think and maybe shake your ass at the same time.
Yeah,
That's what we did, and we knew that we had magic, and we knew that we had the songs. We had three decent songwriters and three decent vocalists and three different musicians, and we were on top of the world.
yeah. And Right Between the Eyes is delivered in a similar manner. Again, that intimacy.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
I, I love that song. Yeah,
yeah,
written about me making love to somebody else's wife, even though they had parted.
yeah. Now, in a song like "Lady of the Island" or "Right Between the Eyes," something like that, um, who are you speaking to?
You,
Yeah, yeah. To be invited in like that. I mean, I don't want to become overly flattering, Graham. But this is the essence of fine writing. You have the specific and the universal conveyed simultaneously. And as far as the intimacy is concerned, you return to it time and time again in that form of storytelling. I'm thinking, for example, of Sleep Song or Wounded
right,
Bird.
right, right.
And you still write in that style.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I want to get you. I want to get you immediately. I'm not particularly fond of songs where you have to wait for the 14th verse before you know what the hell they're talking about.
yeah,
I want you now.
yeah. What comes first to you in the case of those type of songs? Do you carry a notebook? Do you set aside time to write?
I don't do either of those things. I have 50 or 60 pieces of music in my head. I have the same amount of lyrics in my head, and I slowly think about them. I investigate what I'm trying to do. I then try and find a title, and then once I have a title, the melody and the lyrics come reasonably easy to me.
I see. I want to talk about your two most recent solo albums, but I want to stop for a minute. Um, at 1977 and the CSN album, which to my surprise, is this right? It's the band's best-selling album.
Not only that, it's the very first show of CSN alone. Everything
Yeah,
else before that was with Neil. It wasn't
yeah,
until 1977, particularly in Houston, that CSN was in a band on their own.
yeah. I want to specify something about this album, which I think is tremendously undervalued. You have four extraordinary songs on that album. And many people have heard Cathedral, and of course, many people heard Just a Song Before I Go. But Cold Rain and Carried Away, again, you and the platform of a single instrument. In this case,
Yeah.
David and Stephen join in, of course. But what are your memories of writing those songs at that time?
Just that I was in, I think most musicians would admit that they go into a certain place mentally, and you can hardly hear what other people are saying because you're so concentrated internally on writing something like Right Between the Eyes. And Cold Rain is a perfect example of who I am. I was visiting my mother who was not very well, and after that I stood on the steps of the Midland Hotel, which was a very important hotel in my world. It was when Alan Clark and I first met the Everly Brothers on the steps of that hotel, and I was looking, and it was raining and it was cold, and I was looking at all these people passing, and I kept saying, "Why me? Why was it me that left Manchester and Salford and went out into the world? What kind of who was I?" And I think if you really listen to Cold Rain, you'll find out a lot about me.
And also the delivery is fabulous because every now and then you just say something,
Yeah,
rather than sing it. When you're writing, Graham, a song like that, um, do you come to certain conclusions? Do you work things out in your own mind?
I don't want to waste your time. Time is the only currency we really have, and I'll never play you a song that hasn't made it through me.
I see.
Like I said, I don't want to waste your time, and why would I play you a bad song? There's no point, no point.
Right.
So if something's gotten through my sensibility, I realize that A, I'm an ordinary person, and B, I'm talking to ordinary people.
Mm, yes. So let's skip ahead to 2016. You released This Path Tonight, your first solo album in 14 years. And you were writing with Shane Fontaine. How did that album come about?
Shane and I, Shane was in the Crosby, Stills and Nash band, and I could really relate to Shane. First of all, he's English, and secondly, he's a great man, and he's a very friendly and a very generous man, particularly musically. So one day I sent him some lyrics, and overnight he came up with the lyrics and a beautiful melody, and we went on from there. And I think in that tour we wrote about 20 songs together.
Was it exciting to write with a partner again?
Absolutely, and particularly one that was giving me as much musicality as I wanted.
Yeah. It's not a secret that at the time of This Path Tonight, you were going through a divorce after almost 4 decades of marriage.
Hmm.
Uh, as a writer, uh, were you seeking some sort of clarity through your own writing?
Of course. Yeah, and sometimes, the clarity becomes startling, particularly to me. That's why on my album now, which was released after This Path Tonight, I end up saying, I never thought that I would be able to love again at 75. I mean, I thought that romantic part of my life was over until I met my wife, Amy, who changed my total mind and total being.
What I love about now is that, well, as you just said, at 75, I must admit, as a longtime fan, it delighted me because you still have the power to disarm the listener. And if you don't mind, I want to quote a song of yours on that album, Love of Mine. A love of mine, regretting every word I said to you. I can't take them back, but I wanted to. For me and you, how can I help your heart that clearly wants to heal? Can I ever make it right? To tell the truth, I know exactly how you feel. I don't want to be losing you tonight. Graham,
I, l-
that captures that moment so perfectly.
yeah, and it's brave to do that. It's brave to wear your heart on your sleeve because you know you can brush up against people who will either enlighten your heart or crush it to death.
Yeah, and you invite us into that dark space with you.
Yeah, come on in.
Yeah,
I love the darkness and I love the light.
yeah. I bet that those lyrics turned up in a few letters of apology over the years from man to woman, woman to man.
Well, I hope so, and I think a lot of people relate to that. When I do it on stage, I say very often, a lot of people out there, whether you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or both or whatever it is you want to call yourself, I know that you've said something wrong. And everybody, I can hear the chuckles and the laughs because everybody does something wrong. And it happened to me, but I'm a musician, so I turned it into song rather than just fret about it.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of the tour, when you're on stage, does it ever occur to you that the song may have taken on a new meaning?
It's not necessarily that the song has taken on a new meaning. It's a realization that some of the songs that I wrote 50 years ago are still incredibly relevant today. I mean, Chicago, we can change the world. I still believe we can change the world. Immigration Man, Military Madness, even Teach Your Children, is incredibly relevant even today. And, you know, I feel two ways about that. One, I'm honored that my music has lasted so long. And two, we don't seem to have learned much from history, do we?
Yeah. Um, yeah, when I look back to your early political songs, I'd have to think that you may be so disappointed where we are today.
Yes, it's insane. This is not the America that I fell in love with and wanted. I've lived here since 1968. I've been an American citizen for over 50 years, and in this country you can speak your mind. But it seems even today a lot of people fear reticence on the part of Trump. And so apart from people like Bruce, Springsteen, who is telling people the way that he thinks it is, as he has always done with his music. And, when you listen to some of the things he says at some of his shows, you realize that he's not afraid of Trump at all and that he must reflect the times in which we live.
Yeah. So at your age now, Graham, and we should make mention that you're about to go back on the road with the band in July. How do you assess your career as a writer?
I've tried to do my best. I've tried to do my best in everything. Ever since my mother told me when I was a child that my heart was good, just follow your heart, you'll be okay. And that's what I'm trying to do. Always. I've always tried to follow my heart. My heart knows what's good and my heart knows what is not good. And I have to deal with my life just like everybody else does.
My guest on this episode of Writers at Work is Graham Nash, a writer who's composed pop songs that are known to several generations, as well as scores of distinctive songs uniquely his that are worthy of admiration and affection. I encourage you to do a very deep dive into the body of work of a writer who knows how to find popular appeal and also share with us his most intimate emotions. Graham, thank you so much for joining me on Writers at Work.
You're very welcome, Jim. Say hello to everybody that listens.
Will do. Take care, Graham.
Bye bye.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersatworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Until next time, happy reading.